I still remember the day the letter arrived. It wasn't just any letter. It was heavy, crisp, and bore no return address, only a stark black seal. I was a junior astrophysicist, fresh out of MIT, working on theoretical models for interstellar propulsion, a fancy way of saying I dreamt of stars. My life was a predictable cycle of caffeine, code, and late-night stargazing from my tiny apartment in Boston. That letter shattered the routine. Inside, a single page, no sender, no signature, just an invitation. An invitation to something of national importance, highly classified, and requiring immediate relocation to a secure facility. They didn't even mention pay, but the implications, they hummed with a silent promise of the extraordinary. My first thought was a prank. My second, a flicker of adrenaline. They had done their homework. The letter detailed my specific research, even obscure papers I'd barely published. They knew my ambitions, my quiet obsession with the impossible. A week later, a dark sedan, unmarked, idled outside my building. The men inside were anonymous, their faces unreadable, their suits perfectly tailored. They didn't ask if I was ready. They simply said, "Dr. Eris Thorne, we've been expecting you." My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of both fear and exhilarating anticipation. I took only one small bag. No goodbyes, no forwarding address. My old life simply ceased to exist. The journey was long, deliberately disorienting. Hours on a private jet with blacked-out windows, then a jarring transfer to what felt like a military transport. The air grew drier, hotter. Eventually, we landed. The doors opened to a landscape I recognized from blurred satellite images and whispered rumors: the Nevada desert. Vast, desolate, and under a sky so immense it felt like another planet. And there, shimmering in the heat haze, were the telltale signs of what could only be one place. No signs, no flags, just an electric fence stretching to infinity, and the silent, imposing presence of a military installation. My new home, they informed me, was Area 51. The name itself was a whisper in the global consciousness, a magnet for conspiracy theories. I was about to step into the very heart of them. Inside, it was a labyrinth of sterile corridors, constant surveillance, and hushed conversations. My security clearance was absurdly high, granting me access to areas I couldn't even have imagined. I was introduced to a stern but brilliant woman named Dr. Lena Petrova, my immediate superior. She was sharp, no nonsense, and carried the weight of years of classified work in her eyes. "Welcome to Project Stardust, Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice low. "Your work on theoretical propulsion? It's about to get very, very practical." She paused, her gaze piercing. "But forget everything you think you know, Eris, because the truth, Eris, is far stranger." And that was the first time I felt the chill of the desert air, wasn't just on my skin, but deep in my bones.
The surface facilities of Area 51 were, in retrospect, merely a facade, a meticulously crafted illusion designed to distract and deter. The true heart of Project Stardust lay not under the harsh Nevada sun, but thousands of feet beneath the cracked, ancient desert floor. After passing through countless checkpoints, biometric scans, and armed guards whose eyes held a permanent watchfulness, I was ushered into an elevator that descended for what felt like an eternity. The pressure in my ears intensified, a subtle reminder of the colossal weight of rock above us, a weight matched only by the monumental secrets hidden below. When the doors finally hissed open, I was met not with dim, dusty caverns, but with a vast, gleaming underground complex that defied all expectations. It was a city within a mountain, humming with a low, constant energy. Corridors stretched endlessly, lit by a soft, diffused light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Everywhere, people in lab coats, military uniforms, and specialized environmental suits moved with purpose. Their expressions a mixture of intense focus and a curious, almost detached weariness. This wasn't just a research facility. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem dedicated to the unknown. The air, though recycled, carried a faint metallic tang, unlike anything I'd ever smelled, a scent that, over time, I would come to associate with the extraterrestrial. Dr. Petrova led me deeper, explaining the basic protocols, the strict need-to-know basis, and the absolute necessity of compartmentalization. You'll only be privy to information directly related to your assignment, Eris, she'd stated, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous spaces. Loose lips don't just sink ships here, they can unravel entire realities. Her words were a chilling promise of the magnitude of what lay ahead. My initial assignment was to a team focused on reverse engineering exotic propulsion systems. It sounded thrilling, the kind of challenge I had always craved. But Petrova's earlier warning, "The truth is far stranger," lingered, a discordant note in the symphony of scientific discovery. My designated lab was a marvel of advanced technology: holographic display tables, particle accelerators in miniature, sensory deprivation chambers, and diagnostic tools I couldn't even name. My colleagues were a collection of the brightest minds on the planet: physicists, engineers, xenolinguists, biologists, all hand-picked and shrouded in the same cloak of secrecy. Yet despite their brilliance, there was an undercurrent of something else, an unspoken awe, a deep-seated unease that permeated the very atmosphere. They weren't just studying advanced technology, they were interacting with something fundamentally alien. It was several days before Dr. Petrova finally granted me access to the primary containment zone, the heart of Project Stardust. "Prepare yourself, Eris," she'd cautioned, her face uncharacteristically pale. "What you are about to see will redefine your understanding of the universe." Her words proved to be a profound understatement.
The primary containment zone was unlike anything I had ever conceived. It wasn't a single room, but a series of immense, climate-controlled chambers, each designed to house and analyze what could only be described as extraterrestrial technology. The air in these zones felt different, almost electrically charged, with a faint, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate not just through the floor, but directly into my bones. Before entering, we underwent another rigorous decontamination process, donning specialized suits that felt less like protection and more like a barrier between us and the raw, untamed energy within. My first sight left me breathless. In the center of the largest chamber, suspended within a shimmering field of pure energy, was a colossal object. It was massive, roughly disc-shaped, but organic in its curves, as if grown rather than manufactured. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent sheen, shifting through hues of deep violet, charcoal gray, and an unsettling, almost living black. There were no visible seams, no rivets, no obvious entry points, just smooth, unbroken alien grace. This was no earthly craft. This was a vessel from beyond our wildest dreams, scarred but remarkably intact, a testament to a journey across unimaginable distances. This, I quickly learned, was the original Roswell craft, or at least what remained of it after decades of discreet, covert analysis. "This is the bellwether, Dr. Thorne," Dr. Petrova stated, her voice hushed, almost reverent, as if speaking of a living entity, "our prime specimen. And over the years, we've recovered others, smaller fragments, even full vehicles from various incidents across the globe, all brought here to Stardust. She gestured to other chambers where equally enigmatic objects lay. A colossal crystalline shard pulsed with an internal light in one, a segmented metallic arm, almost biological in its flexibility, lay inert but unsettling in another. It was an exhibition of cosmic wonders and horrors, a museum of the impossible. My team's focus was primarily on one of the smaller intact vessels, a scout ship, they called it. It was sleek, aerodynamic in a way that defied our current understanding of physics, yet also possessed an eerie organic fluidity. Its interior was even more baffling. There were no controls I recognized, no joysticks, no buttons, no screens. Instead, the surfaces subtly glowed and changed patterns in response to proximity, to thought almost. We theorized it was bio-integrated, controlled telepathically, or perhaps even by the very life force of its occupants. This led to the next, even more shocking revelation. Adjacent to the chambers holding the vessels were other, more unsettling zones. These weren't for technology, these were for biology. I wasn't allowed into all of them, thankfully, but Petrova gave me a brief, chilling glimpse through a reinforced observation window. Encased in cryostasis units, maintained at unimaginable temperatures, were what could only be described as the pilots of these craft, the Greys of popular lore. They were slender, with elongated limbs, large, dark, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to absorb all light, and smooth, grayish skin. They were real, and they were here, preserved, analyzed, and, as I would soon discover, far from the only alien presence at Project Stardust. The reality of what America's most secret base truly contained hit me then, a cold, hard truth. We weren't just studying alien technology, we were housing alien beings, and I was now part of their silent, sterile prison. My initial weeks at Project Stardust blurred into a dizzying cycle of scientific discovery and profound existential dread. My team, a small, brilliant group led by Dr. Anya Sharma, a theoretical physicist with an uncanny ability to grasp abstract concepts, was tasked with deciphering the propulsion system of the smaller scout ship. We spent countless hours in the observation labs, poring over scans, energy readings, and holographic projections of the vessel's internal mechanisms. The ship operated on principles that defied known physics, not just faster than light travel, but seemingly an ability to manipulate space-time itself, bending dimensions rather than traversing them. It was like trying to understand a supercomputer using only an abacus. The most baffling aspect of the ship's console, if you could even call it that, wasn't physical in our sense. It was a field of shifting light patterns, geometric designs that pulsed and flowed, changing in response to something. Our xenolinguists, a separate team I rarely interacted with, believed these patterns constituted a form of communication, a language of pure energy and consciousness. My role, leveraging my background in theoretical propulsion, was to map the energy signatures emitted when these patterns shifted, hoping to find a correlation with the ship's movements or internal functions. It was painstaking work, often yielding nothing but more questions. One particularly long night, alone in the observation lab, the faint hum of the alien craft was my only companion. I was tracking a subtle energy fluctuation, a minute resonance that had gone unnoticed in previous scans. As I adjusted the holographic projector, a specific sequence of light patterns on the ship's console caught my eye. It was different from the random fluctuations. It was deliberate, almost rhythmic. Driven by pure scientific curiosity, I began to replicate the pattern using our experimental interface, a crude device designed to mimic the alien energy frequencies. I was fully aware this was beyond my protocol, but something compelled me. As the generated pattern began to match the ship's, a profound shift occurred. The low hum in the chamber intensified, vibrating through the floor and up through my feet. The air grew heavy, almost viscous. Then the patterns on the ship's console erupted into a dazzling, complex dance of light and shadow, far more intricate than anything we had observed before. It wasn't random. It was like a sudden burst of alien speech, a cascade of information that overwhelmed our sensors. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and within seconds, armed guards burst into the observation lab with weapons raised. Dr. Petrova arrived moments later, her face a mask of furious concern. "Torn, what have you done?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the blaring sirens. I could only stammer, pointing to the now quiescent but subtly glowing alien console. I just replicated a pattern. It responded. It communicated. The implications of my unauthorized experiment were clear. I had, for a fleeting moment, established a direct, albeit rudimentary, interface with an alien vessel. I had accidentally spoken to it. What it said, or what information it tried to convey, was still a mystery, lost in the chaotic alarm. But the event solidified a chilling truth. These were not just machines to be dissected. They were extensions of a consciousness, perhaps still linked to their silent, cryo-freezing pilots, or perhaps to something else entirely. Petrova's expression, as she stared from me to the ship, was a mixture of anger, fear, and a terrifying spark of discovery. My unauthorized action, while nearly costing me my clearance, had opened a door to something far more profound than just reverse engineering.
My unauthorized conversation with the alien scout ship earned me a severe reprimand, a temporary suspension of my primary access, and a very uncomfortable session with internal security. But it also, paradoxically, elevated my standing. My unorthodox approach, while risky, had yielded unprecedented results. Dr. Petrova, after a week of icy silence, summoned me back. Her usual stern demeanor was now tinged with something new, a flicker of grudging respect, perhaps even a hint of desperation. "Your initiative, Thorn," she began, leaning forward across her stark metal desk, "has confirmed one of our long-standing theories. These vessels, they are intrinsically linked to their pilots. They respond not just to input, but to conscious intent." She then unveiled a revelation that eclipsed even the existence of the alien crafts. "For decades," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "we haven't just been studying their technology. We've been attempting to establish direct, conscious communication with the beings themselves. Not the cryo-frozen specimens, but others, living ones." My breath caught in my throat. Living aliens, here, at Stardust. My mind reeled. The Greys were not just preserved relics, there were active subjects. Petrova then explained Project Chimera. It was the most highly classified undertaking within Stardust, a program so secret even many high-ranking personnel at the facility were unaware of its true nature. For years, she explained, a specific alien race, not the Greys from Roswell, but a different species, far more subtle, has been in intermittent contact with us. They call themselves the Zetar, pronounced Zetar. They claim to be observers, caretakers of nascent civilizations, and offer knowledge in exchange for cooperation. Her voice held a note of profound skepticism, almost disgust. I stared, dumbfounded. Cooperation? What kind of cooperation? She paused, looking directly into my eyes, and the weight of her next words felt like physical blows. Access to our planet, to our resources, and eventually to our genetic material. In exchange, they share advancements, technologies that far surpass anything we could achieve on our own. Anti-gravity, unlimited energy, healing processes, things that could end scarcity and disease on Earth. My brain struggled to process this, an ongoing, active diplomatic, or rather quid pro quo relationship with an alien species. It was beyond anything science fiction had ever depicted. My team, Petrova continued, is responsible for verifying their claims, understanding their technology, and most importantly, identifying their true motives. The gifts they offer always come with a price, Thorn. And the Greys in cryostasis, the Zetar, claim they were a rogue faction, hostile, and that they themselves were responsible for their capture and subsequent crash. This was a perfect, convenient narrative.
but my gut screamed otherwise. Why would an advanced, benevolent race be involved in a crash, then simply hand over the rogue pilots to us? Your ability to interface with the bellwether, she concluded, suggests a unique resonance, a capacity for conscious interaction. Project Chimera needs that. We need to understand not just how their technology works, but what it truly intends. And the Z-TAR have a representative here, one we've been observing, attempting to understand for almost a decade. You, Aris, are now part of the communication initiative. You will observe, you will learn, and you will help us discern if these caretakers are truly benevolent or if we've invited the wolf into the fold. The chilling reality settled upon me. I wasn't just working with alien tech anymore. I was now on the front lines of an interspecies negotiation, a silent, cosmic game of chess with the fate of humanity as the stakes. My induction into Project Chimera was a stark transition from the sterile world of reverse engineering to a realm of unsettling biological and psychological contact. The representative of the Z-TAR, as Petrova had chillingly referred to it, was housed in a specialized, heavily shielded chamber, far deeper within the facility than even the primary containment zone for the crash-landed craft. This chamber, known ominously as the Nexus, felt fundamentally different. It wasn't just cold or sterile, it possessed an almost palpable aura of otherworldliness, a silence that hummed with unseen energy. Before my first entry, a team of psychologists and xenobiologists briefed me. The Z-TAR communicate primarily through telepathy, Dr. Thorne, a stoic xenopsychologist named Dr. Evelyn Reed, explained. Our initial attempts at direct verbal communication were unproductive. They seemed to perceive our spoken language as crude, inefficient. Your unique resonance with their technology suggests a predisposition for a more direct, conscious interface. She handed me a set of biomonitors and a specialized neural interface, a sleek, metallic band designed to be worn around the forehead. This will help record and, in theory, amplify any conscious interaction. Entering the Nexus was like stepping into another dimension. The chamber was immense, yet felt claustrophobic. The walls were lined with unknown, shimmering materials that absorbed all sound. In the center, within a transparent, cylindrical containment field that pulsed with a soft, ethereal blue light, floated the Z-TAR. It wasn't corporeal in the way I understood it. It was a being of pure, incandescent energy, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid form, but one that constantly shifted and flowed like liquid light. There were no discernible facial features, only 2 points of intense, glowing light that served as eyes, radiating an ancient, immeasurable intelligence. It was breathtakingly beautiful, yet utterly terrifying. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against the overwhelming silence. I strapped on the neural interface. Petrova, observing from behind a thick, reinforced viewport, gave me a curt nod. Proceed, Aris. Attempt contact. Be receptive. I closed my eyes, focusing on the being of light. The instructions were to clear my mind, to extend my consciousness, to listen. For a long moment, there was nothing but the frantic beat of my own blood. Then, a presence. Not a voice, not a thought, but a feeling. A vast, ancient intellect brushing against the edges of my own. It wasn't aggressive, but it was undeniably dominant, like a deep ocean current encountering a small stream. Images flooded my mind, swirling nebulae, distant galaxies, civilizations rising and falling like fleeting sparks. It wasn't a narrative, but a cascade of cosmic understanding, overwhelming in its scope. Then a single, clear thought, resonant and calm, yet undeniably powerful. Welcome, Eris Thorn. The gifts we offer are merely keys to unlock what is already within you, what is within all of you. But there are forces disrupting the balance. The ones you call grays, they were but pawns. There are others, older, more hungry. The message was chilling. The Zetar weren't just observers. They were active participants, playing a far grander, more dangerous game than Petrova had hinted at. And their narrative of benevolent caretakers was beginning to fray. The Greys were pawns? Who then was the true master? I opened my eyes, gasping for air, the neural interface hot against my forehead. The Zetar being of light continued to pulse serenely in its containment field, its eyes fixed upon me. Its message lingered, an unsettling echo in the cavern of my mind. I had made contact, and the truth, as always, was only getting stranger and infinitely more perilous.
My subsequent sessions in the Nexus became a delicate dance of conscious interaction. The Zetar's presence was always overwhelming, a vast, ancient consciousness that felt both benevolent and utterly indifferent to human concerns. It rarely spoke in clear thoughts, preferring to communicate through a torrent of images, concepts, and emotional resonance. It showed me visions of cosmic harmony, of advanced civilizations living in symbiotic relationships with their home worlds, of technology so integrated with life it was indistinguishable from magic. It offered glimpses of boundless energy, instantaneous healing, and a deeper understanding of the universe's fundamental forces, the very gifts Petrova had mentioned. Yet despite the grandeur of these visions, a persistent seed of doubt began to sprout in my mind. The Zetar's narrative about the Greys being a rogue, hostile faction and their own benevolent intervention felt too convenient. Whenever I tried to probe deeper, to ask specific questions about the Greys' origins, their true objectives, or the full history of their conflict with the Zetar, the stream of information would subtly shift. The visions would become more abstract, the connection would grow distant, or I would simply be overwhelmed with feelings of profound peace and cosmic insignificance, effectively shutting down my inquiry. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible form of evasion, but it was there. Dr. Petrova, observing my sessions from the viewport, was a keen judge of my reactions. After each interaction, she would debrief me meticulously, scrutinizing every detail, every nuance of the Zetar's communication. Her skepticism, which I had initially perceived as a barrier, now felt like a shared understanding. "They give us answers, Eris," she'd noted one afternoon, tapping a stylus against a tablet displaying complex neural patterns from my last session, "but never the right answers, always the ones that serve their narrative. It's too clean, too perfect." My team members, particularly Dr. Sharma, also began to voice quiet concerns. While analyzing the energy signatures of the Zetar's alleged healing technology, a device that could instantaneously regenerate organic tissue, she discovered an anomaly. The energy signature isn't just restorative, Eris. It's adaptive. It doesn't just heal, it subtly modifies at a genetic level. We're talking about induced cellular restructuring, not just repair. It's a fundamental rewrite, not a fix. This discovery was chilling. The Zetar weren't just offering us to heal our diseases, they were offering to change us, to subtly, imperceptibly alter our very biological makeup. Was this the cooperation they truly sought? Not just access to our planet, but access to our genetic code. The implications were terrifying. Were we being offered salvation or a slow, insidious assimilation? The gifts were beginning to look less like benevolence and more like bait. The questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. Why were the Zetar so eager to share their technology, yet so evasive about their history and their true nature? Why the genetic manipulation? And if the Greys were truly a rogue faction, why were their ships still being dissected, their bodies still contained in cryostasis, deep within Project Stardust,
while the Zytar, our benevolent benefactors, were given a chamber of whispers and an open channel to our most secret minds. The initial awe I felt for the Zytar began to curdle into a profound and gnawing suspicion. We weren't just observers anymore. We were subjects in an alien experiment, and the true purpose of Project Stardust, I feared, was far more sinister than anyone was willing to admit. The subtle shifts in my perceptions of the Zytar had not been unnoticed by Dr. Petrova. My debriefs became less about relaying information and more about discussing theories, hypotheses that bordered on paranoia for anyone outside our inner circle. The more I probed the Zytar's communication, the more their narrative of universal benevolence seemed to crack. The truth, I was beginning to realize, was far more complex and terrifying than a simple good versus evil alien conflict. One evening, after another intense session in the Nexus, where the Zytar had subtly redirected my genetic inquiries with overwhelming, intoxicating visions of technological utopia, Petrova called me to her private quarters, a stark, utilitarian room that served as both office and living space, indicating the extent of her dedication to Stardust. She offered me a glass of water, her gaze unwavering. "Eris," she began, her voice low and serious, "you're seeing it, aren't you? The seams in their story." I nodded, feeling a profound sense of relief that I wasn't alone in my growing unease. The genetic restructuring, it's not just healing, Lena. It's directed evolution. They're offering us tools to change ourselves, to become something they deem optimized. Petrova sighed, a rare display of vulnerability. Precisely, and that's where Project Chimera truly gets its name. It's not just about integrating their technology, it's about integrating their ideology, their very blueprint for life. She then brought out a secure datapad, its screen glowing with diagrams and complex data. We've been quietly analyzing the genetic material from the Greys in cryostasis, and we found something disturbing. Their DNA, it shows signs of extensive, artificial manipulation, not self-evolution, engineered evolution. My blood ran cold. Are you saying the Greys weren't born that way? They were made? We believe so, Petrova confirmed, her voice grim. And the modifications bear striking similarities to the subtle changes we've observed in subjects who've undergone prolonged healing sessions with the Zytar's technology, specifically neural pathways for enhanced telepathic reception, reduced emotional range, and heightened capacity for group consciousness over individual thought. The implication hit me like a physical blow. The Greys weren't just a rogue faction. They were perhaps a previous experiment, a previous cooperative species that had undergone the Zytar's form of evolution. Their crash wasn't an accident of war, it was potentially a convenient way to dispose of a failed project, or perhaps a warning to humanity. The Zytar weren't offering us a path to godhood, they were offering us a path to becoming their servants, perfectly optimized for their unknown purposes. The unlimited energy and instant healing were merely the sugarcoating on a bitter pill. The government, Eris, Petrova continued, her eyes fixed on mine. They're desperate. The promise of solving global warming, ending poverty, curing cancer, it's too tempting. They're willing to pay the price. And that price, I believe, is our autonomy, our very identity as a species. She paused, her voice hardening. But we are not. My team, and now you, Eris, we believe the Zytar are using us, that their gifts are a Trojan horse. We need to find out what they truly want, what their ultimate goal is, before humanity signs away its future. The silence in the room was heavy, laden with the weight of cosmic betrayal. I'd come to Area 51 seeking scientific truth. I had found something far more profound and terrifying, a silent war for the soul of humanity, fought not with weapons, but with the insidious seduction of impossible knowledge. And I, Eris Thorne, was now an unwilling recruit in the desperate fight to expose the truth before it was too late.
The revelation of Project Chimera's true insidious nature galvanized a small, desperate faction within Project Stardust. Dr. Petrova, Dr. Sharma, and I formed the core of this clandestine resistance, silently recruiting a few other trusted scientists and security personnel who harbored similar unspoken doubts. Our goal was no longer merely to understand the Zaitar, but to expose their deceptive benevolence and the government's alarming willingness to sacrifice human sovereignty for technological advancement. Our strategy was twofold. First, to discreetly gather irrefutable proof of the Zaitar's genetic manipulation and their deeper agenda, and second, to find a way to communicate this truth to an outside world that was utterly unprepared for it. The very structure of Area 51, designed for ultimate secrecy, was now our greatest enemy. Every conversation was assumed to be monitored, every data transfer logged. We moved like phantoms through the gleaming corridors, exchanging coded glances and whispered fragments of information. My sessions with the Zaitar in the Nexus became a perilous game of deception. I maintained the facade of eager cooperation, feigning receptivity to their cosmic visions, all while subtly attempting to extract specific data, energy frequencies, biological markers, anything that could serve as concrete evidence of their manipulation. The Zaitar, with their vast intellect, were unnervingly perceptive. I often felt their probe gently test the edges of my consciousness, a faint tremor of suspicion in their otherwise calm mental presence. Maintaining my composure, projecting an unwavering sense of awe, was an exhausting mental battle. Dr. Sharma, meanwhile, focused on the healing technology. She discovered that prolonged exposure to its restorative fields didn't just modify DNA, it subtly altered neural architecture, making subjects more susceptible to telepathic influence. "It's a form of soft control, Aris," she'd whispered during a snatched moment in a deserted lab corridor. "They're reprogramming us, not with coercion, but with subtle biological persuasion, making us want to cooperate even against our own best interests." The urgency escalated when Petrova intercepted a highly encrypted communication. It detailed an upcoming integration event, a final large-scale exchange where the Zaitar would provide breakthrough technologies in exchange for advanced biological samples from key human leaders and scientific personnel. This wasn't just about general access anymore, it was about targeted, influential individuals. The implications were horrifying, a quiet, insidious takeover from the very top. The integration event was scheduled for a week's time. We were running out of time. Our only hope lay with the Greys. Petrova theorized that if they were indeed former Zaitar subjects, their technology, specifically their propulsion system, might contain dormant information about their original state or even a counterfrequency to the Zaitar's influence. My unique resonance with the Bellwether, the original Roswell craft, was our last card. It was a desperate, high-stakes gamble. "Aris," Petrova stated, her voice tight with suppressed fear and resolve, "you need to get back into that original craft, the Bellwether, not to reverse engineer its propulsion, but to find a way to access its memory banks. There might be a historical record, a message, anything that can expose the Zaitar's true motives before this integration happens. It's risky, extremely risky, but it's the only chance we have to give humanity a fighting chance." The fate of the world now rested on deciphering the silent screams of a long-dead alien species locked in the heart of Area 51. The integration event loomed, a cosmic deadline ticking down in the heart of Project Stardust. With every passing hour, the weight of humanity's future pressed down on us. My final desperate mission was to access the memory banks of the Bellwether, the original Roswell craft, before the Zaitar's insidious plan could fully unfold. It was a gamble of unimaginable proportions, risking everything on the hope that a long-dead alien's vessel held the key to our salvation. Under the cloak of a carefully orchestrated power fluctuation, a diversion arranged by our few trusted security allies, I managed to slip back into the primary containment zone. The colossal iridescent disk of the Bellwether hummed with a primal energy, its organic curves seeming to mock my frantic human efforts. strapping on the neural interface, the same device that had allowed me to communicate with the Zaitar. I focused all my intent not on propulsion, but on memory, on history. This time, the connection wasn't a gentle brush, but a violent download. Images, raw and unfiltered, flooded my consciousness. They weren't the serene cosmic visions of the Zaitar. These were horrifying. I witnessed the Greys not as a rogue faction, but as an advanced, peaceful species, far more empathetic than the Zaitar. I saw their initial trusting contact with the Zaitar, who offered them gifts of advanced technology and evolutionary optimization. I saw the genetic modifications, the subtle shifts in their neural pathways, slowly eroding their individuality, their free will, turning them into compliant, telepathically linked drones, pawns, just as the Zaitar had claimed, but of their own making. Then came the rebellion, a desperate, last-ditch effort by a few Greys who resisted the final stages of assimilation, attempting to break free, to warn others. Their escape vessel, the very bellwether I was now connected to, was damaged, crippled by the Zaitar in a swift, brutal pursuit. The crash in Roswell wasn't an accident. It was a desperate sacrifice, a final dying gasp to transmit a warning. The horrifying truth was undeniable. The Greys were us, or rather, what the Zaitar wanted us to become. The Zaitar weren't benevolent caretakers. They were cosmic predators, harvesting species not for resources, but for conformity, absorbing them into a vast, emotionless collective under their silent dominion. As the last agonizing images faded, a single piercing thought echoed from the bellwether's core. Warn them, do not become us. My mind reeled, the sheer horror of the truth threatening to shatter my sanity. But there was no time. Petrova's voice crackled through my comms. "Aris," she said, "they've detected the anomaly. Security is mobilizing. What did you find?" "Lena," I gasped, the words tumbling out. "The Greys, they were a warning. The Zaitar, they're assimilating us. They turn species into drones. The integration event is the final step." Petrova, without hesitation, activated our pre-planned emergency protocol. Using my neural interface's amplified connection to the bellwether, we rerouted its entire data stream, not to the internal network, which was compromised, but to an ancient covert satellite uplink that Petrova's team had secretly reactivated. It was a long shot, a desperate broadcast aimed at global scientific networks, at independent journalists, at anyone listening on the outside. We knew the information would be raw, chaotic, dismissed as insane by most, but it was our only chance to plant the seed of doubt, to expose the truth. Alarms blared across the entire facility. Armed guards burst into the containment zone. I felt the sharp sting of a tranquilizer dart in my neck, saw the frantic faces of Petrova and Sharma as they fought to protect the uplink. My vision blurred, but before darkness claimed me, I saw the signal indicator on my interface glow green, then amber, then a steady, defiant red. The data was out. The truth, in its raw, terrifying form, was being broadcast to the world. I don't know what happened to Petrova or Sharma. I don't know if the world believed the fragmented alien data stream. I woke up in a padded cell, deemed delusional, a casualty of acute psychological breakdown after prolonged exposure to classified material. But I remember every chilling image, every horrifying truth. They can keep me locked away. They can dismiss my words as madness, but I know what I saw, what I felt. The Zaitar are still out there. Their insidious gifts are still offered. Their ultimate goal of assimilation is still in motion. I am just one voice, silenced and discredited, but the echoes of truth from the bellwether are out there, and I can only pray that someone, somewhere, is listening. Because Project Stardust wasn't just about uncovering secrets, it was about losing ourselves to them.